Hi everyone, it's Shamila here from Can Do Teach, and in this video we're going to be talking about algebraic fractions. So fractions are one of those things that give a lot of students quite a lot of trouble, and then it just gets even worse when you start bringing letters and algebra into the mix. So I just want to go through a quick recap of all the rules of fractions and then apply those to algebra. Alrighty? First, let's just remember what we mean by fractions. So I always think of fractions as pizza, because I like pizza. So the number on the bottom, which is called the denominator, is the number of pieces in each pizza. Okay? So in this case, my denominator would be 8, because a single pizza is cut into 8 slices. Alright? And then the numerator is counting up the individual pieces that I'm talking about. So in this question, if I'm asked what fraction of the pizza has pineapple on it, then my answer would be 2 pieces out of an 8 in total. Alright? So the top number, the numerator, is how many pieces we're talking about, and the denominator is how many pieces in the whole thing. And the really important thing to understand with this is that every piece of pizza should be the same size, right? They need to be even pieces, all right? So let's just recap how to do addition of fractions. So when I add fractions, I'm basically counting up the number of pieces that I've got, but I can only do that if all of my pieces are the same size. So it's difficult for me to add fractions with different denominators, so I start by making all the denominators the same. So what I do to this one is I'll make both of the denominators 10, because 2 and 5 both go into that. And now if I made the bottom number here 10, that means I multiplied it by 5, so I multiplied this by 5 as well. And then I made this one 10, so I multiplied this by 2, so I multiplied this by 2, and I get 6. So a lot of people skip that middle step, and they just go, this times this is this, and this times this is 5, and this times this is 6. But I just wanted to remind you of why we do that cross multiplication, because it's something that a lot of students get wrong. All right, so to do that with a completely algebraic example, all we're doing is the bottom 2 numbers multiplied, this one times this one, and this one times this one. All right, so that's addition. Subtraction is much the same. We again need a common denominator, so we do 3 times 2 here, and then we do this times this, which is 4, and this time the order is really important. So we have to do this one first, and then subtract 3 times 1, so 3. So we end up with 1/6. All right, so again here, that just becomes b times d on the bottom, a times d on the top, minus b times c. Easy. So now multiplication is even easier actually. All we have to do now is just multiply the tops and multiply the bottoms. So I just go 3 times 4 is 12, 2 times 1 is 2, and then remember you can simplify. So if there's a common factor between the top and the bottom, I can cancel that out. So that becomes 1/6 if I just divide top and bottom by 2. All right, so here that just becomes AC times BD. That's it. Multiplication's the easiest one. So with division, you have to remember the rule that you flip and multiply. So you take the second fraction, flip it over, or find the reciprocal. So you go, the first one stays the same, times the flipped over reciprocal of the other. So 3/1 in this case. And now we just go through and multiply the old way. So 9/4. Alrighty? So for this one, again, we keep the first fraction the same, multiplied by the reciprocal. So I turn this one over, and that just becomes AD/BC. Easy, right? So now the thing we have to do a lot with algebraic fractions is simplify them. And this is where a lot of students run into trouble. So with simplification, all that means is kind of cancelling out something that's multiplying the top and the bottom. So remember, when you have a common factor between the top and the bottom, you can cancel that out. So that goes the same for algebraic factors. So in this case, if I did the full multiplication, it would be 6x over 3x squared. And now I know that 3 goes into both the top and the bottom, so I can divide top and bottom by 3, and that will give me 2x over x squared. And now I can see that I'm dividing top and bottom by x. I can also divide top and bottom by x. And so that makes it 2 over x. All right? So the simpler way to do that is to kind of see that there's a 3 common to both. So I can just cross it out, cross both of these out and say that that's a 2 instead. And then with the x's, say that, well, there's x in both. So that cancels out with the squared, with one of the x's on the bottom. So I'm just left with 2 over x. The other thing that you can do is actually skip this step as well. So because we know what happens when we multiply, we can actually cancel across terms as long as they're all multiplying. Okay? So if it's multiplication, then I can say that this 3 will cancel with this 6 to give 2. And this x will cancel with the x squared to leave just 1x. All right? So then that simplifies to 2 over x. This one's completely gone, and I'm just left with 2 over x. Alrighty? So I can do the same thing here, but the step that I like to do in the middle is to take out the common factor from all the terms on the top. So it's really important when you're simplifying that if you have multiple terms, you're cancelling the same number out of all of them. So on the top, I would see that these two terms have a common factor 3. So I'd actually factorize that first. And then I just ignore the things that are being added together and I look at the coefficient. So here 3 and 9 have a common factor of 3. So now I can cancel that out just to leave a 3 on the bottom. So I'm left with x plus 2 over 3. All right? So you can also do that without doing the factorization step. I can just notice that 3 is a common factor in all of these things. And I can say, all right, divide that by 3, divide that by 3, divide that by 3. I'm left with x plus 2 over 3. But it's really important to notice that you are cancelling out of each and every term. All right? So that leads me to one of the very common mistakes that I see, that people will see something like this and say, okay, I know that 2 is a common factor out of 2 and 4, and they'll try and cancel like that. But you can't do that because there's no 2 to cancel out of this x term. So you can't simplify like that. Another common mistake that I see is when people see something like this, they'll just say, okay, I multiply the top by 3 and the bottom by 3. So 3x over 12. But if you notice, this hasn't actually changed the fraction, right? This is exactly equivalent to this because I can just now cancel the 3 out of the top and bottom and give me x equals 4 again. So that doesn't work. What I need to do is realize that this 3 is equal to 3 over 1. And so when I multiply, I only multiply the numerator. So you can skip this step if you want, but remember that you just multiply the numerator. So it's just 3x over 4. Alrighty? And finally, when you're adding two things, one of the mistakes that's really common is to try and cancel out. Remember, that only works when this is multiplication, not when it's addition. And occasionally I'll have a student try and add the tops and add the bottoms, which also doesn't work. You have to do the whole cross multiplication thing. All right. So to summarize, when we're dealing with algebraic fractions, it's worth remembering what the fractions actually mean. So remember the picture of the pizza and ask yourself, okay, what's my denominator? What's my numerator? What do those things actually mean? All right. And so what happens a lot is that students know how to do fractions with numbers, but as soon as the letters come into the mix or the pronumerals come into the mix, a lot of those rules kind of get forgotten or kind of go out the window. So don't do that. Remember what all of the fraction operations are and spend some time practicing and revising those. And then make sure you're applying them in the same way to your algebraic terms. Okay, and that way you can avoid making a lot of the mistakes and losing a lot of silly marks. All right, so I hope that helps refresh your memory and kind of clear up some of these concepts for you. If you have any questions, please ask them in the comments below. And also, if you'd like me to do a video that goes more in depth into fractions, let me know and I can do that for you as well. And finally, if you want one-to-one help, you can always find it at candoteach.com. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.